Yo, what's up, Danny? How you doing? We are live. We are here. Word up. Hello, hello. Toxicute Danny, hello. What's going on? Thanks for tuning in. Commissar Skull on the lurk. What's news? What's news? Hit me with it. I'm ready. I'm ready. We had a tornado warning on Monday, but I lived. That's kind of exciting. I know it maybe, you know, means danger and damage and stuff, but coming from somewhere that doesn't have tornadoes, the idea of having a tornado is kind of exciting. So, yo, what's up, Zero? Hello, hello. All right. So, today, what we're going to get into. I'm going to start building an environment in 3D on 3dCoat. And I'll show you some tools on 3dCoat as well, just if no one's familiar with the program, kind of get an idea of what I'm doing. But yeah, I'm gonna build an environment on 3dCoat, something that I will later take to Blender to set up lighting for, which we'll go through, and then finally into Photoshop to paint it up. I have like an idea of what I want to build, but I haven't done any sketches for this or anything, so I'm just going to kind of freestyle it in 3D, just how I would normally. And yeah, I'll show you some of the cool tools that 3dCoat has along the way. And then when we get into Blender, which probably won't be today, but I will show you how to set up a render, and we'll go from there. So yeah, bit different, more 3D. And then finally we'll finish up in Photoshop and paint it. So there you go. And yeah, we'll get into it. Yo, Sarah, what's up? Okay, so 3dCoat. This is the program. It is a 3D program. Duh. It's very powerful. You can do a lot of stuff in 3dCoat. It's very good for painting textures and so on 3D models, hence the name 3dCoat. It's got a very good kind of painting engine in it. However, I know nothing about that side of the program, really. I've never used that side of the program. I only use it for 3D modeling. And yeah, I find this program to be very, very powerful. And it's very good for, I think, sketching in 3D. So while it is very good for making like game ready assets and has amazing topology tools and all of that, that's not what I use it for. You know, I use it to sort of sketch out stuff that I'm going to use in illustrations. So the geometry that I make doesn't need to be really super clean or anything like that. And I just need to do it sort of, you know, fairly quickly. And then I can take it into, you know, Blender or even render it within 3dCoat itself to get what I need. But yeah, it's a program that I've used on and off for several years. And yeah, I just thought I'd share some of my like workflow in there so you can get a sense of like what I'm using it for and how I use it. And I'll show you some cool stuff along the way because it's it's a mad program. It's unlike other 3D programs in a lot of ways. And so we'll get into it. So 3dCoat is voxel based, okay? Which means basically it's Minecraft, all right? I'll show you what I mean. So I'll quickly bring in something here. So you have tools in 3dCoat and you kind of have brushes as well. So tools are all of these things, okay? And then brushes are these. And I'll talk a bit about these as I go into them. But like most tools, you know, you can use a lot of the brushes with, and they're just different ways of like using the tool. And so I've just got this set up here. If I go up here, this grid, this is perspective view, okay, and this is orthographic view. I prefer to work in orthographic. It makes it easier. A lot of stuff in 3dCoat will use like the camera's angle as a projection. So if you're working in perspective, you can kind of make some weird cuts, a bit like ZBrush in that way. But anyway, so that's here. That's this cube. So if you see me flicking back and forth between these, that's what's going on. So anyway, let's bring in a bit of geometry and I'll sort of explain voxels a bit. So I'm going to use this tool, primitives tool, and I'm just going to select a cube. Okay, just make it a little bit bigger. Going to hit enter, and this puts the cube in space here. Okay, and I'm able to move it around. If I like move my view around and I press shift, it will like snap it to the face that I'm like closest to. So if I'm looking around it like this and then I hit shift, it's going to snap to that face, the view in orthographic. So that's kind of quite nice. Little thing there. So anyway, this cube, right, if it was in poly modeling, right, using polygons, what we would find if I was to cut through this would be that this box would be hollow, right? It would just literally be the 6 faces of it, okay? And there would be nothing inside. But voxels, like I said, is Minecraft, right? This is a solid object all the way through. So if I use a tool like cutoff, which does what it says, and I use like a rectangular lasso like this, and I just cut that out. As I turn it, you see this is actually still solid, right? And then if I was to go here and make another cut, for example, it's still solid. And I go here and make another cut. So this is voxels, right? They are 3-dimensional pixels, which means that your objects are always solid, and this enables you to do kind of quite crazy stuff that you can't do in other programs, or at least you can't do with such relative ease, right? So I'm just using this cutoff tool here just to cut shapes through this. But I could use a different brush. For example, I could use this freehand lasso, and I could do something like this. Okay. There's also like a spline tool that kind of works like the pen tool in a way. And obviously there's circle and so on. So that's kind of one thing that you can do with this, all right, which has got a ton of possibilities to it already. But what if I was to, Let's do something different here. Oh. Help! If I just cut all of this stuff off. Actually, let's get rid of all this. I'll make a new one. That's fascinating, indeed. And we haven't even started yet. Okay, so I got a new cube here. Sick. And I'm going to use this tool called Voxhide. Okay. Now, Voxhide is insane. Okay, just get that off the start. Voxhide is a crazy tool. So if I do the same again, just like cut off, I've cut this portion of the shape off. With Voxhide, it's cut it off, but it hasn't deleted it. It still remembers what the original geometry was. So what I can do is if I hold Control and select again, I can bring back some geometry. Okay, so I've brought this back because it was originally a cube and I cut that part off. Okay, so if I was to do something like this, it brings it back. Okay, and if I can still cut away something like this, well, let's say I go to the top and do this, you start to see how crazy good this could be. It's very simple to make insanely complicated geometry with this. Okay, and I can still continue to cut this stuff off. If I don't want it to go all the way through as well, like that, I can use this here, where it's ignore back faces, and if I turn this off and cut through, whoop, didn't do it there. I'll show you how that works later. So this is Voxhide, right? Which is very powerful. But let's say, there's other things you can do with this. So another thing that I can do with Voxhide, so let's bring back all of the geometry, right? I'll bring all of it back. Let's say I use this lasso tool and I cut out, I don't know, just like a freehand shape like this. What I can do here is, if I go to geometry, separate hidden volumes, it's going to bring back the cut as a separate piece. So now I can sort of play with this, you know, in different ways than the original. So, you know, why this could be good, for example, if I just do file new, don't save, and I just bring up this head, for example, here. All right. And I've got this piece of geometry here, and I'm like, oh, I want to give this guy, I want to start making a helmet for this guy. I can use Voxhide. Okay, and then geometry, separate hidden volumes. Give my man a little helmet. So And now I can select these two as different things. So what I might be able to do here is if I wanted a certain shape on this, you know, I could use Voxhide again. Oh, use Voxhide again. Do something like this. Go. Et voila. Yeah, make it wider. However I want, you know, I can start sculpting like this. So you can use surfaces that you already have to make new surfaces and pop them out. And you do this very simply. And yeah, you can get quite intricate by hiding geometry, bringing it back, and using selections to sort of work through and so on. So it was a very, very handy tool. I use this one a lot. And I'll show you something else. Okay. So this tool, it's called 2dPaint. Okay. So I've got this cube here. Let's make this cube just a different color for now. Okay. And I've selected a new layer and I'm going on 2dPaint. And I've got this brush. Okay. And if I right click on this cube, you see here it's now changed my selection orientation. So if I right click on it, you see my brush is now on here. Now if I paint with this, I'm now painting on that plane. So if I right click here and I paint on this plane, I do this, right click here, paint on this plane, and this way I can paint in 3D, right? Which is very handy. So with this, you know, for example, I could make a kind of a walkway, you know, a sort of village walkway, you know. Something like this. And if I get rid of that cube, put this in perspective mode, see what I mean? I could even quickly go into the render engine on this and get very quick geometry for an illustration. Okay, and this is very powerful, this tool, because you can do all sorts of things with it. You just need some geometry to clip it to. So I don't know if you remember the witch's hut in the swamp that I did, that was up in the trees. Well, this was the tool that I used to make the hut with. So what I did was I used this tool, primitives tool, and I used this one that looks like a vase. Okay, and this is mental. Okay, this tool is crazy. So at the moment, yo Yokino, what's going on? So at the moment, it's just a cylinder, okay? But if I start to change this profile, as you see here, I start to get a cone as I move this in. And I can add points to this, okay? So let's do something like this. So if you imagine this profile that I'm creating here is spinning. And that's what's creating this geometry. It's kind of like a lathe, right? And I can change the proportions of this as I go. This isn't, I've not made this yet. But if you imagine trying to make this in other 3D programs with the speed and finesse that you could have in this, we'd be talking about, and I can change it into a cube as well. We'd be talking about a lot of time invested to do something like this. And all I'm doing is changing this line. I'm just changing this profile, okay? Pretty crazy, right? So let's turn this back to a cylinder. And let's get rid of some of these points. Okay, so I could have a piece of geometry like this. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to make it for me. Et voila. I make a new layer. And I'm going to go to 2D Paint again. And zoom in. And, you know, I'm going to go around. And I'm right clicking to orientate to the surface, you know, and I go all the way around like this. And you could imagine, obviously, you do that for the whole thing and you can create the geometry for, in this case, like a wooden hut, something like this. Now you can speed this up, okay? If I undo all of these, if I turn on radial symmetry, so if I hit S, that brings up the symmetry tab. I'm going to select radial symmetry, and I've got it on 4 right now. So as you can see here, if I start drawing, it's now duplicating that around the center in 4 axes. So I can, you know, do this a lot faster all the way around. So this is the 2D Paint tool. So you just need some geometry underneath to guide it, that you right click and orientate your brush to. And then I'm just using the radial symmetry here to do it all the way around. Something like this. And then I can turn off the thing underneath, and you know, I have like a basic sort of thatched roof. And if I continue, I could make like a whole cottage. And what's nice as well is that I can continue to play around with this geometry as is. Like I can still stretch it and so on, change the proportions, etc. Very quick to build something up. You know, I've very quickly built like a whole village with this stuff before. Just make a few assets, and yeah, you can do a whole thing very quickly. But it's really nice. I find the 2D tool like very nice for doing like organic stuff. Works really, really nicely. So this is one thing you can do. And again, just go in a render room, set it up, get the angle I need, and then can go from there. So some other tools. Another really good one. Let's again bring up primitives, and I'll just bring in another cube. Et voila. Okay. Cool. A cube. Very interesting, right? However, what if I was to show you the pose tool? Now, the pose tool is very interesting. Okay. What you can do is I can select like a portion of this model like this. And this red area and this gradient is the area that it's affecting. And I can use the pose tool to modify this, okay? So I can pull it up, but for example, if I move the whole thing, because I've got radial symmetry on, it's doing something like this. If I turn it back, and I just turn symmetry off for a second because it's going to get very confusing. Okay, symmetry is off. So this I can muck around with, right? I can move it around. For example, I can make it thinner in one axis or another axis. And this fall off is like what's governing how quickly that's happening. You know, I could shrink this in evenly, you know, can pull it up. You can do anything you want. The world's your oyster, okay? You can even twist this, something like this. So you can very quickly manipulate objects in this way. But I find it quite useful as well to, so if I clear this selection, do this, and clear the selection again. Really need to make a shortcut actually for clearing selection. So this I find very useful for building out like architecture very quickly. You know, it can go around, use these tools, pull this stuff out. For example, let's clear the selection again. Something like this. Okay. This is a good place where I could use ignore back faces, right? So I do this. So if I go from the top, and I do that, just reset the axis. Okay, pretty exciting stuff. Now, if I was to turn on the symmetry again, that's where we can really get some cool stuff going. So if I turn on symmetry, I got radial symmetry again. Let's do that. And get some real quick architectural stuff going on here. So you could build all sorts of like pieces like this and then kit bash together, you know, city or buildings. All that kind of stuff. It's very, very quick. Columns, you know, anything. And it's super quick to make. Like, well, it'll just take less than a minute. So, very powerful, again. And this is how I did the buildings for the Abyss image that I did. Was to model them this way very quickly. Just give me some geometry to go with, and then yeah, render it, put it through the renderer, and then use it for 3dCoat. Sorry, for Photoshop. So yeah, these are just going to be some of the tools that I'm going to use today to build a 3D environment. like I said, I've got like a rough idea in my head of what it is going to be, but I haven't drawn anything down. Imagine like a subterranean temple. It's very old. And I say subterranean like it's underground in a cave. But over time, the river that was above it, above ground, has like eroded its way through the ground and then has started obviously to erode its way through the temple. And the river is now just a trickle, right? But we have the roof now like opened up because the river eroded through it, and then we have this like erosion in the ground, and then we have the rest of the temple kind of around in a bit of disarray, maybe some trees growing into it, and so on. It's just going to be a very sort of old and ancient place. And yeah, it's something I want to try sort of build out a little bit more in 3D than I would otherwise. And we'll then take it into Blender when it's done and light it before going into Photoshop and painting over it. So we're doing a whole thing. And I will continue to use like some of the cool tools in 3dCoat as I go. As you can see, there's a ton of ones, and yeah, they're all great. They're all very powerful. One second. Okay, one sec. 3dCoat's acting up. It's a good start. Just going to quickly close it and reopen it. So there we go. Anyway, exciting stuff. Maybe you don't care about 3dCoat, but I do. Okay. It's working again. Brilliant. Let me just quickly like save this so that it auto saves as I'm going, because I don't want it to. I don't want it to crash, or if it does crash, at least while I'm streaming, then it will have an autosave. Yeah, I mean, because 3dCoat is voxel based, it enables you to do all of these things. So to do these in a poly modeling program is a lot more difficult, a lot more time consuming, and not as like quick and intuitive. And that's why I really like 3dCoat, because yeah, it's very quick to create this kind of geometry, this kind of complicated geometry, and it's good enough. Like I guess for illustration, I don't need models that are insanely complicated. You know, I do most of the heavy lifting in Photoshop, so it's just a really quick way for me to get stuff that I wouldn't otherwise have. And that's why I really like it. So let's use, I'm trying to think what we should use for this. Okay, so I am making a floor plane, basically. And I'm sort of carving out a shape that the river has made in this floor plane. I'm just doing this from above currently. And I'm using this tool. It's basically just like a brush, right? And if I hold control, it cuts in. And if I just use it normally, it adds material. So like it adds material like this. Okay, or it cuts material away like this. So just carving in this shape, trying to get something a little interesting. So I'm just thinking about, you know, a river that would have carved through this kind of softer stone over time. And there's still going to be bits that are kind of like higher and so on. We're just trying to get a sort of an interesting shapes. And then we'll put like another bit of geometry under this that can serve as like the water. Just thinking about this as like the floor of the temple, basically. And let's make that a different color. Just for now. Doesn't need to be anything in particular, but something like this. And then I'm going to use Vox hide here on this with a kind of freehand lasso tool, and using the orientation of the camera here to cut material away. You see that? This is what's quite nice about it. Some of these tools as well, is the way that they work like this. So I can use the camera rotation itself to form the angle that the cut's being made at. Like a days. Some rando bits of floating stuff here. Perfect. Get rid of some of this stuff. Get rid of any like tiny bits of geometry that you don't really need. But yeah, this could serve as the beginning of quite a nice like floor plane in here. So let's see if I can duplicate that. Let's duplicate this. So I'm just duplicating it, put it on a layer above, and then again I'm just using this layer here and cutting back through it to give us like an extra edge to this. Nice. Okay, so already this is starting to maybe work out quite nicely. Pretty interesting, pretty interesting. So what I'm going to do, let's just go back to this. Quickly save this. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge. Let's label some of these as well. Let's go water. Ground 1. Ground 2. Okay. I'm going to change the parent of this to this. So now these two are joined together. So this one and this one are joined together in a sort of parent group. And then I'm going to merge that subtree. So now they're all one. And as you can see at the moment, this is 430,000 trees. That's a tree is a 3D pixel, right? That's one of the voxel pixels. So I am just going to resample this. I'm just going to lower the resolution of it, basically. So there we go. And that way I can keep working and have, you know, basically my computer's not going to kill itself as we go. But yeah, this is like quite a nice start for the floor overall. And let me, I'm just going to make these smaller within my workable area. 3dCoat doesn't like it so much if you go outside of this area. So I'm just making the model kind of smaller relatively so that we get a better performance out of the program. And let's continue. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm going to use cutoff. And just cut all this bit away. Okay, duplicate this bit again. And basically I'm just making this, using this geometry, this edge, if you like, to just make our floor plane not square. Let's give it some rando edges, and that way it's going to be a bit easier to frame up in a shot later, because it's just going to have all this kind of random edges to it. And we can add other geometry in here as well. It's just going to help this. And yeah, so I'll duplicate this again. This is the other nice thing about 3dCoat, is like once you make some part of it, because you can like warp it, move it around, you know, duplicate it, cut bits off, etc., etc. You can start to build up, you know, complicated stuff quite quickly, so on and so forth. Nice. Yeah, I'm just thinking about the shot. The shot, yo. Let's duplicate this piece again. Everyone's dead today. Chat's dead. You're either mesmerized or bored as all heck. Yeah, don't worry. Don't worry. It's I'm only messing around. Yeah, this shader is really nice. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, there's some really nice shaders in the 3dCoat as well, which are just like, you know, helpful sort of default ones in here. These clay ones are quite nice. Yeah, see, then just pick up the geometry in a nice way. It's very sort of naturalistic, you know. Something like that. Although the base of this isn't going to be like mud like this, but ew. Yeah, something like that's a bit easier to see, like the geometry. Maybe we'll use this one for a bit. Go with the milk shader. All right, So we've got all these grounds here. Let's merge all of these together. So let's change the parent of all of these. So I'm going to right click, change parent, select ground 2. Change parent, ground 2. Do it. And this way I can do merge subtree. Don't know why it didn't merge it. Classic 3dCoat. Let's just do them all manually then. We'll just call this ground 3. Yeah, boom. Okay, now let's resample this. Let's turn it down a bit. Yes. Okay, we'll put it back on the gold shader for Sarah. Where is it? I don't know where it's gone. Damn, we lost it. I don't know where he ended up. Oh, there we go. He's come back. There we go. All right. Enough. Okay, so duplicated this for the ceiling. Okay, I'm just going to cut a lot of these middle bits out. Why am I doing this freehand? Let's use the pen. Sometimes in 3D, obviously, I like using the mouse, but the pen, obviously, the pen is mightier. Okay, and what I'm going to do is split these apart. So I'll use split and select this side. And now this is its own separate thing. And we can go back to the shader here. And I will select this and use transform. And the transform tool kind of gives you this gizmo, right? And you can use that gizmo to let's change the parent of this to root. There we go. Yeah, so the transform tool, it gives you this gizmo and you can essentially move things around. Very helpful. And you press H. If you press H as you hover over something, you will get that object selected. So it's like, does that little flash to tell you know you've got that one. So what I do is I keep going back to the perspective view here, and I try and think like about my camera shot later on when I come to the render. Yo, what's up, Jonah? How you doing? So I go inside like this and I have a quick look inside. I'm like, okay, this is like what it's going to look like roughly. You know, I can also sort of jump in here and get a bit of a better idea as well. But I'm trying to see, like, if I was to frame up the camera in here, you know, what kind of a shot am I looking at? And this gives me a better idea of sort of where things should go in here. And I'm going to keep using these kind of river edge, well, floor edge pieces here to sort of build out a little bit more geometry, walls, and so on. And sort of design the space a little bit more. Yeah, mate, I'm good. I'm good, Jonah. I've just been working, obviously, and yeah, it's nice to come on and do a bit of a stream. Sort of like designing this as I go, which never goes well, you know. Doing some Blender stuff recently. Cool. Yeah, very nice. Yeah, when we get to Blender on this, it should be pretty fun, pretty exciting. Whoa. Okay. Let's get some more pieces going. So the idea with this is like it was once like a sort of a subterranean temple, right? But it has sort of semi-collapsed with the river on top of it eroding through, and then the river continuing kind of to erode through the floor. So we have this kind of ceiling hole and floor space, and then we'll have some like pillars and other bits in here. I just like the idea of sort of the light coming through the top, and it being a bit sort of subterranean and sort of destroyed a little bit. We have some like trees, roots that are sort of growing out and around the top, for example, and like the ceiling sort of collapsed in the back here in several layers. Pardon me. So at the moment I can keep using these like floor pieces that I made to sort of build up this environment. It's sort of like essentially sort of kit bash a little bit using the things I've already made. And I keep checking it in the perspective view. I kind of like this view. I also kind of like this view. And I'm just sort of seeing where these places sit. I think this is one thing that does take a bit of time in 3D that is sort of quicker when you draw things out, is that in 3D you have to kind of keep moving around, right? And yeah, that's nice for finding different angles. But if you were just drawing this, you're stuck in this view, and you just draw from this view, and there's less kind of messing around in that sense. But in 3D, right, you gotta keep moving things around. Let's go to center mass. There we go. I'm just getting all these layers of like collapsed ceiling kind of in here. I just want them kind of overlapping in a sort of an interesting way. Give me some depth and some interesting shapes back there. I don't exactly know what angle, the final shot is going to be from, but it's nice to kind of keep looking inside and seeing what interesting shapes there are. And I'm thinking about the composition as well. You know, I'm trying to think about, okay, the light coming through the top here and the sort of compositional flow and lines that these intersections are taking. So like here, it's quite a nice sort of curve in top and bottom. Similarly here, there's this nice sort of curvature going on. And I'm just trying to find a nice flow. Overall. And then what's nice here is I can quickly just turn on the render, and this, you know, this gives me some sense of what rough lighting could be like. Later. Just find it a little bit helpful to look at these things as I go. The river eroding the ceiling is a cool concept. Do you already have an idea of how far you want to push the piece in 3D before switching to 2D, or you just keep working on it until you hit a good point? For this one in particular, I wanted to stay in 3D a bit longer than I would usually, and also to actually like light it a bit more in Blender. So the idea is that it's going to be a bit more sort of established in this sort of stage, and than I would usually do it, just because I'm kind of into the idea of doing it that way this time around. So we're, you know, I might already deem this, if I was not going to do it that way, might already deem this enough to go into 2D with, but yeah, I'm purposefully trying to do a bit more with it. Let's see. So we got 2 million trees right now. So let's resample some of this. Okay, there we go. Got myself a bit more res to play with. You got to watch that a little bit in 3dCoat, because you can accidentally make stuff that is massive. And yeah, you can accidentally make, you know, geometry that's like 40 million trees and then crash your program. So you just got to be a little bit careful. All right. Give me a sec. I just need to use the bathroom, and then I'll quickly save this. But yeah, give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back. Yo, I'm back. So let's do a few things in here. I want to make some kind of pillars that would have been sort of holding up the ceiling, and then put them in here, make some damaged ones, basically. So I'm going to turn off all of these for now, just so that they're not in my view. Make a new layer here, just like Photoshop, really. And let's gonna make a kind of a pillar. Seems good. Hit enter. How big is he? 45k, and that's okay. All right. And then we're going to use the pose tool. Oh, with the rectangular at it. Clear selection. Clear selection. Okay, very quick pillar here. Actually, let's turn on radial symmetry. Do something like this. Okay, let's resample this. Just gave us a little bit more geometry here. Try this again. A bit kind of sharper in there. Whoa. Okay, let's raise this up a little bit. So what I want to do here, Yeah, it's quick AF, isn't it? What I want to do here is something that's very cool. I want to add some decor to this. So I'm going to bring in a stencil. This is just a black and white image. Okay, let's turn off tiling so I don't ruin everyone's eyes. And I'm going to use the build tool here. Basically. Whoa. Okay, that. So basically you can use a stencil, right, to cut geometry in. If I turn this off. Like this. So you can make these in Photoshop. Obviously it's just a black and white picture. You can search for patterns and so on. I've got several patterns in here to do certain things with. And again, really quickly you can get kind of designs cut into this. And you can like resize this. Something like that. Whoa. Pretty sick, right? So got these nice patterns. Very cool. But yeah, maybe I want to also do something like this. So do the something like that a couple of times. Whoa. I want this to cut into it. There we go, like very damaged quickly. Let's resample this. Just see how much we lose taking it down. Yeah, it looks alright. It'll do for this. I'm going to turn the radial symmetry off now. Oh. Chomp. Okay, so we got this version of it, and then I'm going to quickly duplicate it. And so would you be able to duplicate this pillar and then cut off differently so you have lots of different damaged pillars with the same base model? Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay, yeah, so we got this one. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to use Vox hide again. It's kind of like the wrong texture for that. Let's go for something else. Undo, 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 undo. It's kind of deep. Okay, that'll do. And then we'll go back to this one. We'll duplicate it again. Okay, now we got pillars to play with. Let's put a cool shader on these. This shader is literally just to tell the difference between this and the rest of it, but okay. Yeah, really fun for level design, for sure. Yeah, it's just like playing with a Lego set. Really. It costs the same as a high-end Lego set. Yeah. Yeah, except that you've got all the pieces. All the pieces in your imagination. I'll tell you what's going to happen though. I'm going to end up not liking any of this and just redo it. Random question. When you're exploring environments like this, do you think about real equivalent culture influences when choosing patterns and shapes, Norse, Greek, etc.? I haven't done, no. To be honest, this isn't something that I have had to do for work in a long time, like make up an environment. Completely. It's mostly not my job. So would it, if there was a project where it was set in a particular time, I'd obviously, the patterns etc. would come into play, right? But it's not something I encounter on a daily basis or anything. I am not an environment designer by any stretch of the imagination. I do a little bit of environment stuff here and there in illustrations, but this is much more of a hobby. At the moment, doing environment stuff in 3D and so on. I'm just mucking around. But yeah, it should be something that you'd pay attention to if you were designing for a certain game or a certain project, and that stuff would be important. You just want to like rando mix stuff together as I'm doing. It's not gonna make it much sense, So distinctual taste. Wow, you never know. Because I don't know which way round I'm going to have this yet. I'm sort of working at it from two angles right now. I'm not overly bothered about these things in the ground plane, because that's the kind of thing that I can do in Photoshop, right? Paint up to the bottom of things and add foliage and whatnot in there. I'm just being conscious of where things are relative to the camera, though. So if I have the camera shot like this, what I'm thinking about is distance of certain things from the camera, and how that affects the size that they appear. So like here, if my shot's this way around, this is quite nice visually for me, because I have like big, medium, small when it comes to the pillars. And when I was doing it over this way, I have this big pillar here, small one here, small one here, kind of medium one here and here. So I'm trying to think of my sort of design principles in the placement of things based on these like two angles in here. And I have these like flow lines, right? The opening in the ceiling is a flow line, this kind of S curve, and then we have the other S curve in here. So these two flow lines are kind of pulling me into the image. This one kind of gives us a nice diagonal across the image, and that's going to be kind of like a sky hole. Whereas on this side, it's the floor that kind of brings us in. And again, we have that S curve up here that kind of mimics that. So it's because I don't know exactly where the shot's going to be from in here. Like, I'm assuming it's this direction, but, you know, as to exactly where the camera's going to be placed, not entirely sure. So I'm just trying to make sure that where I place things at the moment, it kind of has a nice aesthetic to it overall. So I keep checking it from like here and like over here. For example, these are kind of two shots, if you like, that I'm sort of thinking about. And depending on what will happen as well is, like, if I choose this one, then the direction of the light that comes in can also dictate where the eye's going to look, and the kind of flow that its stuff's going to have. So just rezzing down some of these pillars. Just give myself a little bit more. A little bit more resolution to play with. Yeah, currently on 5 million, which is fine. Did you thumbnail before the 3D or straight to 3D and decide composition like you're doing right now? Yeah, I didn't do any sketch for this. Like I had in mind, oh, I want this kind of river that has kind of eroded into the top of what was a temple of some description, and that it's all overgrown and so on. So that was there, but the composition is something I'm figuring out right now as we're doing it. But yeah, the composition of stuff is something I'm constantly doing. It's a major part of my everyday is composition, right? So it's something I'm very kind of familiar with. But I'm trying to keep design principles in mind, right? So I said big, medium, small, with where the pillars are in my view. But also, I'm thinking about thick to thin. So with the river here, the shape in the ceiling. That's why I was moving this back piece around. Is that I have it. This sky hole opening is nice and wide here, but then it quickly tightens up and becomes much thinner, and this has a nice energy to it. I've got big sweeping curves that then tighten up as they go back here. Similarly, in this way, I've got wide space that goes dramatically thinner, wide space that goes dramatically thinner. I've got the walls tapering down, so they're going from thick to thin. I've got these big plates, but then they get more stacked as they go back, so that they get sort of tighter and smaller, and so on. And it's all in an effort to sort of lead the eye. These diagonals, just creating interesting shapes for the eye to follow. And that's kind of a bit more intuitive for me now, but it's because I do it all the time. So let's get tree tool. I'll just let this auto save. The trees are something that I'll ultimately probably paint a lot of roots and stuff in, but 3dCoat has this really cool tree tool for generating trees. Let me just move it up so that I can actually see the roots, because that's what I'm more interested in. Because I want the tree roots like growing through the ceiling, right? And ultimately I'll probably paint a lot of these, but let's get a few in here for the shits and giggles. So yeah, you got this tree tool and you can generate trees, right? But you can change all the parameters about them. So For example, you can change like the curvature of the trunk and the branch thickness, you know, root curvature, root length. You can see it's changing all of these parameters. And so on. It's pretty funny little tool to muck around with. Now you hit generate tree and you got yourself a tree. But I don't need the trunks on this, so I'm going to cut that off. Logging tool. Okie dokie. Let's get some of these in here for shits and giggles. Like I said, I'm going to paint most of these. But I'm just curious to see how the lighting in Blender will create some like interesting cast shadows with the ones that are actually here. So I'm just kind of interested to have a few dotted around for that reason. Ultimately, if I don't like them, I'll just turn them off. So let's see what this looks like in this render. Yeah. Yo, Commissar Skull with the raid. It's a skull raid. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Welcome, welcome. The dead army is here. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Alright, I am kind of tempted to just put this in Blender real quick and have a quick look. What does everyone think? I'm intrigued. Let me just go on the camera quick. And I'll save this. And then I'll export it to Blender. Export scene. Yeah, we'll export this to Blender and have a quick look. I do want to do a lot more sculpting on this, and like the nature of me sculpting this on stream, it's kind of hard to like concentrate on every aspect of the design of this. I do. So I'll probably come back tomorrow with some new ideas on the sculpt. But I just want to have a quick look in Blender anyway, and we'll see how it's looking, because that might give me some motivation. Right, so yeah, sorry, I'm just saving this out quickly. And we'll export it to Blender. So let's open up Blender. And I'll bring it in. Hopefully don't absolutely kill my computer. And we can have a quick look at it in Blender. Okay. Where'd my music go as well? There we go. Alright, we're almost there. Almost there. Sorry, my brain is fried. Absolutely fried. Hey, Bronto Zava, thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. Okay, we got it in Blender. We're here. We're here. It's here. It's in Blender. It's absolutely massive. Let's scale this down. Okay, and then we'll separate the viewport out. Go in to this one in the camera. What on earth just happened? What just happened? Hang on. One sec. Okay. File. Yep. Scale. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm back. I don't know what I did. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna no. Yes. Here we go. Da-da-dun-dun. Cave Explorer drone. Yeah. Ooh. Interesting. Yeah, man. Blender's so fun when you get to mess around with all these things. Okay. Interesting. Whoops. Yeah, interesting stuff. What I would do as well is when I do come to light this, I'll use like an HDRI to get some nice ambient light in the scene. As well. And we can hide a couple of lights in the scene maybe. Which would be interesting as well. Should I put crazy HDRI on? Let's do it. Let's do it. Give me one sec. I got this crazy HDRI that I was using. So this is gonna look mental, but I'm curious. Not that I would actually use this one. Okay. All right. Bet you didn't think it was going to be the crazy witch disco cave, did you? Peekaboo, hello. Welcome. Looks good to me, boss. Ship it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, it's the only HDRI I ever got downloaded at the moment, so... Okay. But interesting then. It's nice seeing it in Blender here and like what I might else need for the shot, and how else it might work. You know, I think it needs a lot. Yep. So yeah, I'm just thinking about the shot, okay? Like, and what else more that I would want in this environment. I feel like I need a bit more like verticality in the in it here. Maybe this erosion of the bank like needs to slope down a bit more because I lose a bit of the river in the view here. You know, if I'm thinking about, if this is the angle, I'm not saying it necessarily is, but if I was going from this angle, like I kind of want the river to sort of come into me a little bit here, the edge of it to be sort of through this area. So a bit more of a slope, a bit more like verticality, I guess, in there. I definitely want a bit more sort of interest overall in here, like more rocks and stuff. And there's certain things that are kind of better for me to paint because I can design them a bit more, but the floor is one of those things that is in the sculpt, so I would do that. Rocks and that kind of thing, don't necessarily need to sculpt all of those. They're a bit easier to just sort of paint them in as and where I need them. Yeah, I think the shadows cast by these is kind of an interesting thing, but it's sort of thing that you could just fake when painting it, because you know, the way that these come into the thing is kind of random here, and I could actually paint and design the shapes of the trees, you know, to be a bit more interesting for me. Similarly, like the pillars, right? I think I'd want to put a bit more kind of thought into the design of them and placement of them. But this serves as quite a nice kind of sketch, if you like, for what I'm looking for. And I can use this as the base to sort of flesh out my environment a little bit more. And sort of replace, you know, the assets, as it were, as I go through. It's definitely in the right realm. You know, enjoying the look of it in that sense. But yeah, definitely needs a bit more work, I would say. Which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying it like it's a bad thing. It's just more my observations as I look at this. And I think I would want the light sort of coming into the scene at an angle, something like this potential, where it comes in and it's lighting the floor in a kind of interesting way. Catches the bottom of the pillars quite nice, you know, something like this. Let's see. Yeah. See, that could be kind of a quite nice setup, with the sun coming through. You know, I really like where it's hitting the pillar here, for example. That's really nice. And these other gaps are kind of interesting. These like sun holes in the back there. Kind of quite interesting. What happens if we go on the camera here and we're getting all lost now. Go on the camera here and go for like a 15mm lens. Enable us to see a little bit more. So I'm looking like graphically at, you know, the light shape would be on the floor, something like this, right? kind of leading us in from the front edge, catches the pillar. Catches the pillar here. And then we have a nice diagonal with the ceiling hole. And this would be light as well out here. So don't forget that. We'd have this white, this would be kind of a light shape, and this would also be a light shape up here. And they're intersecting each other so that they'd kind of converge around about here. So it divides up the image in a nice way. You know? This would be light, that would be light. I think that's quite nice. Obviously, we'd place more lights around, right? It's not just going to be... So, 0.01. Just so you can see a bit more. About 0.1. Lol. But something like this, right? That would make a nice shot in my estimation. I would move things around a little bit still. This pillar, I might move a little bit closer to the camera, for example. And like I was saying with the floor, like open that up a little bit more so that we see down into the sort of river area a little bit more. But it's got a nice play of light already. I would close this up, so this would just be more closed off. But again, we could do that in the painting. Put this into the floor. Yeah, it's got potential. It's got potential. What are you guys thinking? And I'd use a much more natural HDRI. I'll source one tomorrow. For that. Having these two strong shapes intersecting will put something at the focus point, like a character object, or will it stay purely an environment piece? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah, it could be that it leads to like a small focal point. For example, we could even have like water pouring through here, you know, like a waterfall in the back here. So it's like this was actually where the river was, but it's cut through, and now that it's fallen through, like this back part is a waterfall, and it's coming through the floor here. That could be quite nice. And that would kind of give it a bit more of a focal point. Yeah, we could, for example, switch where this pillar is in the back so that it's not cutting across this shape, and it's actually like over here, you know, crumbled and holding up, or not holding up the wall. And so it leaves the sky hole open, and then that have a bit more of a kind of a waterfall-y thing going on in there. Yeah. I do want to make this... I need to figure out how to do this actually in Blender. Maybe someone knows. To make this camera viewport like wider, the render window wider, I'd ideally like want to render it like 21:9. Maybe you just do that in the... Oh, in the output. To 100. Oosh. Yeah, that's much better. Alternatively, right, we do it like over this way, and the light shape on the floor, cuts across, or you change the direction of the light. Lots of possibilities. But yeah, cool. It's like, I'm actually glad we came into Blender and had a look at this, because it's given me, some thought about placement of things and where stuff should go. I think it's important to sort of jump across and do this, and like I said, mostly don't go into this much detail with the 3D. So it's nice to sort of think how I would sketching, but be doing that in 3D. So interesting stuff. How are you free moving the camera like that? So yeah, when you're here in your camera's view, if you press Shift tilde, tilde is like that little squiggle on your keyboard. It's above tab for me. Between tab and escape is tilde. So it's Shift tilde, and what that does is changes your navigation to WASD and the mouse. So you can fly around your scene in the camera like this. You can also find it if you go to View, Navigation, Walk Navigation. Interactively, yeah, Walk Navigation is the one. But Shift tilde is the shortcut for that. And then yeah, you can use WASD, which is way nicer. Wonderful. So that is basically it for today. Sorry if that was a bit disjointed. I'm not as comfortable sculpting and talking at the same time as I am with drawing and painting. So sorry if that was a little bit disjointed and you're a bit like, what the hell's going on? Yeah, Jonah, I hate the 3-axis movement stuff in Blender. That's really something I dislike about the program. But a colleague of mine told me about the walk navigation, and I was like, holy, game changer. So, anyway, as I was saying, so yeah, apologize if it was a bit disjointed. But tomorrow we'll continue on with it. I'm going to have a little think about the composition and so on. And think about what it needs, and then we can jump into 3D again tomorrow, add anything that we need, and then also jump into Blender and really figure out the render and such. So I wanted to say Sunday is going to be the critique stream, critique and paintovers stream. So that means drop any image that you're currently working on that you want some help with. It's going to be first come first serve basis, but I will aim to get through as many as possible. So please drop your work in progress that you want help with and write a small paragraph about it to just tell me what you're struggling with, what the point of the illustration was, all of that stuff. And I'll collect them all together. And yeah, if I've got enough of them, then I'll stream on Sunday, this Sunday coming, and we'll do another critiques and paint over stream. And then if I've got time, I'll continue working on something like this. So we go. That's all the news. Thanks again, everyone. And I will catch you tomorrow, same time. Peace out.